G'day, and welcome back to the channel. Grab a cuppa, because today we are talking about something a lot of Aussie riders don't want to hear. Some of the biggest names in motorcycling, brands that have been sitting in showrooms from Perth to the Gold Coast for decades, are in serious, genuine trouble. We are not talking about a slow sales month. We are talking insolvency proceedings. We are talking factories going silent. We are talking dealerships shutting their roller doors for the very last time, and parent companies quietly selling off iconic marques for pennies on the dollar just to stop the bleeding. If you're thinking about putting a deposit down on a new bike in 2026, this video could save you an absolute headache, because a shaky manufacturer doesn't just mean a shanky warranty. It can mean part shortages, collapsing resale values, dealers who can't get stock, and in the worst cases, a brand that simply isn't there anymore when you need a service. Now, before anyone gets the pitchforks out, Australia's overall motorcycle market isn't falling off a cliff. The Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries has been reporting a market that's basically stabilizing after a couple of rough years, with off-road bikes and scooters actually propping things up while road bike sales soften. But underneath that stable headline number, individual brands are having wildly different experiences. Some, like Royal Enfield and CF Moto, are eating market share at a rate of knots. Others are in genuine freefall. So let's get into it. These are 6 motorcycle brands that, in our view, you should think very, very carefully about before signing on the dotted line in 2026, and exactly why each one's in strife. Stick around till the end, because number 1 is the biggest shakeup the motorcycle industry has seen in a generation, and it directly affects 3 brands you'll see in Aussie dealerships right now. If you're new here, this channel is all about cutting through the marketing fluff and giving it to you straight. No sponsorship, no dealer kickbacks, just the numbers. So if that's your kind of content, smash that subscribe button before we dive in. The state of play: Australia's motorcycle market in 2026. Let's set the scene first, because context matters here. According to FCAI figures released in January 2026, just under 93,000 motorcycles and off-highway vehicles were delivered to Australian customers in 2025, a modest 1.3% drop compared with 2024. Off-road bikes held up well. Road bike sales slipped a bit over 3.5%, and scooters actually grew nearly 4%. FCAI boss Tony Webber pointed the finger at the usual suspects: cost of living pressure, high interest rates, and households being a lot more careful with discretionary spending. Sound familiar? It should. It's the same story hitting car yards, caravan dealers, and boat sellers right across the country. Zoom out further and you'll see the Australian market has been sliding since its COVID-era peak. Back in 2021, when international travel was off the table and everyone was pouring stimulus cash into hobbies, we sold over 123,000 new bikes in this country. By 2025, that number was sitting closer to 84,000 to 93,000 depending on which data source you're looking at, a serious contraction from the sugar-hit years. Industry analysts tracking the motorcycle dealership sector have also flagged that dealer revenue has been going backwards at close to a 6% annual clip over the past 5 years, even as the broader economy improves. That's the backdrop every single brand on this list is trying to survive in, and some are handling it a lot better than others. And here's the thing that makes this such an interesting moment to be shopping for a bike: it's not a uniform slump. Honda and Yamaha have actually been growing their local market share, and industry commentary consistently puts them at the top of the pile. CF Moto and Royal Enfield, despite sitting outside the official FCAI sales figures because neither is a member of that industry body, are widely understood to be moving serious volume through an expanding dealer footprint. Off-road bikes and kids' machines have been the standout growth category too, with registrations climbing sharply through the first quarter of 2026 alone. Meanwhile, scooters have grown, road bikes from certain legacy manufacturers have gone backwards, and anything tangled up in overseas financial drama has taken the biggest hit of all. So this isn't a "the whole industry's doomed" video. It's a know exactly which manufacturer you're about to hand your hard-earned cash to video. With that context locked in, let's get into the 6 brands. Number 6. Ural, the sidecar legend running out of road. We're kicking off with a brand that's always been a bit of a cult favorite here in Australia: the boxy, Soviet-born, sidecar-equipped Ural. If you've spent any time at an adventure bike meetup or seen one thundering along a dirt track with a swag strapped to the sidecar, you know exactly what we are talking about. Ural Australia has been importing these things since 2008, when founder John Taylor brought the first shipment into Armidale, New South Wales. In 2016, the American importer Urbit Motorworks of America took over Australian distribution, and the brand has potted along ever since with a small but devoted following. Here's the problem. Ural's global manufacturing operation has hit a genuine wall. In April 2025, new United States tariffs landed, and almost overnight it became close to impossible to profitably build these bikes and sell them into what was Ural's biggest market. The company has openly admitted that its legacy production line is winding down, and it's now scrambling for a longer-term manufacturing solution, including exploring a partnership with a Chinese manufacturer to keep the classic sidecar format alive under a new arrangement. For Australian buyers, that means anyone eyeing off a new Ural right now needs to ask some very pointed questions at the dealer. Are you buying one of the last of the legacy builds? Where will parts and servicing come from in 3 years' time if the manufacturing base shifts overseas to a completely different partner? Ural itself has acknowledged this is a genuinely difficult transition for the brand, and that's about as blunt as a manufacturer statement gets. Now, to be fair, Ural was always a low-volume, niche proposition. This was never going to be a CF Moto-style volume play. But niche and wobbly is a very different proposition to niche and stable, and right now, Ural sits firmly in the former category. If sidecar life is your dream, we're not saying don't do it. We are saying go in with your eyes wide open about what support might look like down the track. Number 5. Piaggio Group, Vespa, Aprilia, and Moto Guzzi feeling the pinch. Now, this one might surprise you, because on the surface, Vespa is about as bulletproof a brand name as exists in the two-wheeled world. 80 years old in 2026, an absolute design icon, still turning heads on Italian cobblestones and Bondi backstreets alike. But the parent company behind Vespa, the Piaggio Group, which also owns Aprilia and Moto Guzzi, has had a genuinely rough run. Global two-wheeler sales for the group fell to around 265,000 units in 2025, a drop of roughly 13.6%, marking the lowest annual total the company has posted in a decade. Full-year net sales and profit both came in below the prior year, with the company pointing to a mix of soft demand in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region, tricky currency movements, rising raw material costs, and the flow-on effects of new emission standards pulling forward sales into the previous year and leaving a hole behind them. To their credit, Piaggio's management has kept margins relatively healthy by managing costs carefully rather than slashing prices, and there are genuine bright spots. Aprilia's sports bike range has actually been picking up market share in North America, and the group has been busy launching new models like the Vespa Gran Turismo and refreshed Primavera and Sprint scooters. This isn't a company circling the drain by any stretch. But here's why it makes this list. When a group that owns 3 separate motorcycle and scooter brands posts its worst sales result in 10 years, that has real knock-on effects for dealer networks, for how much investment goes into future model development, and for how aggressively brands like Moto Guzzi and Aprilia can compete against a rising tide of cheaper, well-specified Chinese competition. Industry watchers tracking Piaggio's numbers have been blunt about it too, suggesting the group is now leaning almost entirely on brand heritage rather than innovation to hold its ground, and heritage alone doesn't win market share forever. For Aussie buyers, Moto Guzzi and Aprilia dealers here are relatively thin on the ground already compared to the Japanese majors. If the parent company keeps tightening its belt globally, don't be shocked if that dealer footprint gets even leaner in the years ahead, something worth weighing up against the undeniable romance of owning an Italian V-twin. Number 4. Indian Motorcycle, sold off at a massive loss. Right, this next one is a proper bombshell, and if you own an Indian, or you've been shopping for one, you need to hear this. Indian Motorcycle, reborn back in 2011 after its parent company Polaris bought the dormant brand and rebuilt it from the ground up into a real rival to Harley-Davidson, has just been sold off. In early February 2026, Polaris confirmed it had completed the sale of Indian Motorcycle to Carolwood LP, a private equity fund based in California. Polaris took an absolutely brutal financial hit doing it too, booking something in the order of a $330 million loss on the disposal, on top of hundreds of millions more in asset impairments tied to the sale. Why would Polaris cut a brand loose that generated close to $500 million in annual revenue? Because Indian had been sliding for 4 straight years. After hitting an all-time high of over 30,000 global units sold in 2021, the numbers kept sinking, down to around 24,000 odd units by 2025. Growth basically stalled outside North America, with sales dropping sharply in Asia and by close to 20% in Europe. Industry commentary at the time was fairly pointed too, suggesting Indian had leaned too heavily on limited edition models and familiar, heavyweight, old-school engine designs that just weren't pulling in younger riders the way modern, lighter, more affordable bikes from brands like Royal Enfield and Triumph have been. Inside Polaris, Indian had reportedly become something of an afterthought, A nice historic name to have in the portfolio, but not the strategic growth story it once was, especially as Polaris poured resources into fending off aggressive Chinese manufacturers like CF Moto in its core off-road and side-by-side businesses. So what does this actually mean if you're looking at a new Indian Chief, Scout, or Roadmaster in an Australian showroom this year? In fairness, private equity ownership doesn't automatically spell doom. Plenty of private equity-backed brands do just fine. But it does mean a fresh, unproven ownership structure, a brand that's just been offloaded at a steep loss by a company that no longer wanted it, and genuine uncertainty about what product investment and dealer support will look like over the next few years while Carolwood figures out its long-term plan. If you're the type of buyer who wants rock-solid certainty that your manufacturer will still be cranking out parts a decade from now, Indian just became a considerably riskier bet than it was 12 months ago. Number 3. MV Agusta, the Italian thoroughbred that can't find stable ground. If you know your Italian exotica, you'll know MV Agusta has a habit of making some of the most beautiful, screaming, race-bred motorcycles on the planet, and an equally consistent habit of nearly going broke doing it. The brand's had more ownership changes in the past 20 years than most of us have had motorcycles, cycling through various investors, restructuring plans, and endless promises of a turnaround that never quite sticks. For a brief, shining moment in 2024, it looked like things had actually turned a corner. MV Agusta sold around 4,000 motorcycles that year, a genuinely stunning 116% jump on 2023, driven partly by a wave of dealer stock registrations to shift aging Euro 5 models before new emissions rules kicked in. Then 2025 happened. MV Agusta's production got tangled up in the financial meltdown of its then part owner, KTM's parent company, more on that catastrophe in a second, which halted output at times and smashed the brand's first half sales. Global registrations for 2025 collapsed to roughly 2,148 units, a drop of nearly 28%, and barely half of the previous year's total once you strip out the artificial boost from dealer self-registrations. Industry analysts covering the Italian motorcycle sector have been fairly damning in their assessment, pointing out that MV Agusta's leadership has spent recent years chasing exclusivity, limited editions, and glossy brand positioning while, in their words, the actual commercial side of the business has been left adrift. In January 2025, the Sadra family, MV Agusta's earlier owners, took back full control to insulate the brand from KTM's insolvency proceedings, and management has since talked up ambitions like a proper MotoGP entry in 2027 and a full model range refresh for 2026. Good on them for having ambition. But this is a company generating something in the vicinity of $40 million in annual revenue, selling around 2,000 to 4,000 bikes a year worldwide, competing against giants with infinitely deeper pockets, and it's a company that, by its own recent history, has never once managed to string together sustainable, consistent profitability. For an Australian buyer, MV Agusta bikes were never mainstream to begin with. You're talking premium price tags stretching well past the $30,000 to $40,000 plus mark depending on the model, aimed squarely at enthusiasts who want something rare and race-inspired. That exclusivity is part of the appeal, no doubt. But when a manufacturer's sales have nearly halved in 12 months and its balance sheet has been this shaky for 2 straight decades, you want to think hard about long-term parts availability, resale value, and whether the dealer down the road will still be an authorized MV Agusta service center in 5 years' time. Number 2. Harley-Davidson, America's icon, is bleeding dealers. Now we get to one of the biggest names in the entire industry, and one of the most confronting stories on this list, because it's happening at a scale that dwarfs everything else we've covered so far. Harley-Davidson's own financial filings tell the story in black and white. Worldwide retail sales of new Harleys fell 12.4% in 2025 compared to 2024, and 2024 itself had already been down sharply on the year before that. North America copped it especially hard, with some quarters seeing retail sales drop by 17% or more. Asia-Pacific and Europe both went backwards too, hit by the same challenging economic conditions and high interest rates squeezing discretionary spending everywhere else in this list. Full-year net income for 2025 came in at around $339 million, a 26% drop on the year before. Here's the bit that should really give you pause, though: dealer closures. In the United States and Canada alone, of roughly 650 authorized Harley dealerships, 73 have shut their doors since August 2025. We are not talking small, obscure operators either. This includes century-old, historic dealerships. A San Francisco dealer originally founded by an AMA Hall of Famer closed after 110 years of continuous trading. A New York Harley-Davidson dealership shut down. Closures have hit dealers across Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, Wyoming, Florida, Missouri, Pennsylvania, and beyond. To be crystal clear, Harley-Davidson hasn't gone bust, and this isn't some centrally mandated mass shutdown. The company itself has stressed that these are individual dealer decisions in response to genuinely unsustainable local trading conditions, and reports of a blanket blackout of every dealership have been debunked as nothing more than routine end-of-year holiday closures. Harley has also brought in a new CEO, Artie Starrs, in August 2025, who's been openly upfront that retail sales remain under real pressure, while talking up plans for a more affordable entry-level model aimed at bringing younger riders into the brand for the first time. But the core issue for Harley is structural, and it's been building for years. Its traditional customer base is aging out of riding, younger buyers aren't coming through the door at anywhere near the same rate, and rivals, including Japanese manufacturers and a resurgent BMW, which has actually overtaken Harley in some US sales measures, are eating into territory Harley used to own outright. Add in the fact that more than 9 million low-cost Chinese-made motorcycles were sold globally last year, reshaping the entire value end of the market, and you can see why the pressure isn't letting up. Here in Australia, Harley dealerships are a fixture of country towns and capital city fringes alike, and there's genuine concern rippling through that dealer community about what a shrinking global network means locally. If you've got your heart set on a Softail or a Road Glide, that emotional pull is completely understandable. Harley remains a genuine cultural institution. Just go in with your eyes open, ask your local dealer directly about their own trading position, and think carefully about long-term parts and resale value if the brand's global contraction continues at this pace. It's also worth noting that Harley's own leadership is very publicly trying to turn this ship around rather than pretending everything's fine. Management has flagged 2026 as a rebuilding year, with a sharpened focus on repairing strained dealer relationships, adding promotional support, and getting an affordable gateway model onto showroom floors to try to hook a new generation of riders before they buy something else entirely. Whether that strategy lands in time is genuinely an open question, but it does mean this is a brand actively fighting for its future rather than one quietly accepting decline, which counts for something if you're a long-time Harley loyalist wondering whether to stick with the brand for your next purchase. Number 1. The KTM Group collapse, KTM, Husqvarna and GASGAS. And here it is, the big one. If you've bought, or considered buying, a KTM, a Husqvarna, or a GASGAS anywhere in Australia in the last 2 years, this affects you directly, because all three of these brands sit under the same corporate parent, and that parent went through one of the most dramatic insolvencies the motorcycle world has ever seen. Let's rewind. On the 29th of November, 2024, KTM AG, then owned by the Austrian conglomerate Piaggio Mobility, formally applied to begin court-supervised restructuring proceedings. In plain English, the company admitted it couldn't pay its debts and needed legal protection while it tried to reorganize. The numbers were staggering. KTM had racked up debts north of $3 billion Australian dollars. Around 3,600 employees at its Austrian manufacturing base were directly caught up in the fallout, with reports at the time of workers waiting anxiously on delayed wage payments over the Christmas period. What actually caused this? For years, KTM had been aggressively pushing motorcycle stock down the pipeline to distributors and dealers all over the world, building bikes at a pace the market simply couldn't absorb. By the time the music stopped, warehouses everywhere were stuffed with unsold inventory, dealers were drowning in stock they couldn't shift, and the factory itself ran out of cash to keep the whole machine turning. In February 2025, creditors voted through a restructuring plan. They'd received just 30 cents in the dollar on what they were owed, and KTM AG had to find roughly 900 million Australian dollars to hand over to the restructuring administrator by May 2025, backed by an additional $82 million in fresh emergency funding from shareholders just to get the factory line moving again in mid-March. Even the company's beloved motorsport programs weren't spared. Its factory MotoGP rider roster got trimmed, and its associated brands vanished entirely from the Moto 2 and Moto 3 grids for a season. Through 2025, the restructuring bit hard. The company slashed motorcycle inventory by more than 100,000 units over the course of the year, dropping from roughly 248,500 units in stock at the end of 2024 down to about 147,400 units by the close of 2025. It also wound down its entire e-bicycle division, with sales then nearly halving. And then, in one of the most striking corporate rebrands you'll see in this industry, the parent company officially changed its name in January 2026, from Piaggio Mobility AG to Piaggio Mobility AG, reflecting a fundamental shift in ownership and control toward the Indian manufacturing giant Piaggio, and relocating its registered headquarters in the process. Here's why this matters so much for Australian riders specifically. KTM, Husqvarna motorcycles, and GASGAS all operate through the same tightly interconnected, and now significantly restructured, dealer network here. If you've got a KTM adventure tourer, a Husqvarna enduro bike, or a GASGAS trail bike sitting in your garage, or you're eyeing one off in a showroom this year, your ownership experience, servicing, warranty support, parts availability, resale value, is directly tied to how successfully Piaggio Mobility manages to finish stabilizing this business. And while the company insists it's now through the worst of it, with production back up and inventory levels normalizing, you're still talking about a company that was, by its own admission, functionally insolvent barely 18 months ago. To be fair dinkum about it, there's a genuine case for cautious optimism here too. The debt has been restructured, the excess inventory purge that caused the crisis in the first place is largely done, and Piaggio brings serious manufacturing scale and financial backing to the table. This isn't a brand walking dead, it's a brand that's been through major trauma and is trying to walk it back with a new owner at the wheel. But trying to walk it back and rock solid are two very different propositions, and if you're spending upwards of $20,000 to $35,000 on an adventure model, or considerably more on a flagship, you deserve to know exactly what you're buying into. So there you have it, 6 brands, 3 continents worth of financial drama, and one very clear lesson. A famous badge on the tank doesn't automatically mean a financially healthy company standing behind it. To be completely balanced here, none of these 6 brands are necessarily going to vanish overnight, and plenty of riders on all 6 of these bikes will have zero issues whatsoever. Cult followings, passionate dealer networks, and genuine engineering excellence still count for a lot. But if you're about to drop tens of thousands of dollars on a new motorcycle in 2026, doing your homework on the manufacturer's actual financial health is just as important as test riding the thing around the block. Ask your dealer the hard questions. Look at how long they've held the franchise. And if something about the deal feels a bit too good to be true, there might be a very good reason for that. If this video helped you dodge a bad decision, or if you ride one of these 6 brands and want to defend your bike in the comments, we want to hear it. Seriously, let's have the debate down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it useful, subscribe if you want more straight-talking motorcycle content with zero dealer spin, and drop a comment telling us which brand you think is going to bounce back hardest in 2026. And hey, if you're currently cross-shopping any of these 6 against something like a Honda, a Yamaha, a Triumph, or one of the newer Chinese-built adventure bikes flooding into Australian showrooms right now, let us know down below. That could very well be our next video. There's a lot to unpack about who's actually winning while these 6 brands are doing it tough, and we'd love to dig into it with you. One last thing before you go, none of what we've covered today should be read as never by these bikes. Plenty of riders on KTMs, Harleys, Indians, MV Agustas, Vespas, and Urals absolutely love their machines and will keep loving them for years. What we are saying is simple: go in informed. Ask about the dealer's own financial position. Ask about parts lead times. Ask what happens to your warranty if the local distributor changes hands again. A 5-minute conversation now could save you a world of grief 3 years down the track. Until next time, ride safe, keep the rubber side down, and we'll see you on the next one.